hearing on the recommended boundary changes and closing of Crescent Elementary School. We will have a short presentation followed by questions from board members and discussion and questions or comments from members of the public. Let the record show that all board members are present for this hearing. Dr. Murillo, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. LaPerla. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Mark Schultz to the podium. Tonight, we will be holding a public hearing on the proposed closing of Crescent Elementary and proposed boundary changes. Mr. Schultz, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Murillo. All right, thank you, board. Tonight, I would like to start off with an overview of the current challenge that we're faced. Crescent Elementary School has a capacity of about 140 students. There are currently 64 students enrolled at the school. The school has experienced a steady decline in enrollment over the last 7 years. Despite joint efforts to promote Crescent, increase enrollment, many families continue for options. So as I presented 2 weeks ago, I share many of the same bits of information. So during Dr. Murillo's first year as superintendent, he asked me to work with the school and community to create an action plan to grow the school. Here are some of the things that we have done. We established the only Project Lead the Way program to entice families. We offered it to all classrooms during the day. Students learned about computer science, engineering, and biomedical science. This was a great opportunity for students. Unfortunately, we were unable to sustain this due to teacher. We assigned a full-time principal to the school. Previously, Crescent shared a principal with another school. We did this to ensure that teachers had access, feedback, and coaching for development, and also to ensure that the site was. The principal created a call list of all families that lived in Crescent that did not attend. Reached out to them and contacted them to talk to them, see if they would be interested in coming. Made those calls several times over several years. Another action step we did is we held some regular meetings with the Crescent community clients. We met fairly regularly prior to the. We agreed to open a parent paid preschool if fundraising was secured for startup costs, which included a playground that meets preschool specifications, and if there was enough interest. After holding several screenings at the school, there wasn't enough commitment from families. We developed some slogan and branding to help with promotion. You may remember the hashtag Crescent slogan. This was posted on community and throughout the community and on the Crescent section. We advocated for the addition of kitchen companies to provide some resources that hadn't been available on the site. Next thing we did after the pandemic, we selected Crescent to be the site of our elementary virtual academy in hopes of increasing. This allowed us to eliminate combination classrooms that had been in place for several years. The virtual academy offered opportunities for families that were worried about COVID. Unfortunately, the enrollment really didn't take off in 5 years program. We also did some cosmetic and infrastructure enhancements to the school. We added new paint, new carpet, we upgraded technology to support the virtual academy. We also installed a secure vestibule to have safety at that front of Our hope was that our actions in collaboration with the community would increase enrollment. We are disappointed that those efforts. Now I'd like to provide a summary of the current. There are 122 kindergartners through 5th grade students that live in the Crescent area. 51 of those students attend Crescent currently. 41 of those students open enroll to other districts. 30 of these students attend other Council Bluffs schools. Less than 50% of all K-5 students in the Crescent attendance area attend the school. The majority of families attend other schools. Now let's take a look at enrollment over time. As you can see from the graph, that trend line that's going slightly downward, that there has been a decrease in enrollment over 7 years. You remember that 2021 school year? That is when our district did a hybrid model where we had half students being educated virtually at home while the other half were on site at school, and we rotated that each day. At Crescent, we were teaching at that time combination classrooms. We had K1, 3, and 4, 5. We couldn't ask those teachers to also teach students remotely in addition to grade level classrooms. So some students were reassigned to other Council Bluffs schools. Now I'd like to take a look at the class size at Crescent. Crescent's class sizes are the smallest in our district with an average of 11 students. The schools listed on this graph, left to right, we have Bloomer at 22, Carter Lake at 23, College View has 22, Crescent, as I said, has 11, Edison 22, then we have Franklin and Hoover both with 25 as their average class size, Lewis and Clark is 19, and then Longfellow, Roosevelt, and Rue, all three have 23 as their average class size. Crescent has our two smallest classes, general classes in the district. Currently in 5th grade, they're on site, and in 2nd grade, there are 9 on site in that classroom. So this slide represents the amount of money that the district spends on students. You'll notice a pretty big gap there on spending Crescent and the district and other elementary districts. About $14,000, just a little bit under that, is what we spend on students at Crescent, and just a little bit more on at other elements. A little bit more than $9,000 there. Even though the enrollment has decreased, our investment to the school has increased. As you can see, that about a little over 40% more money spent on students at Crescent than other districts in our city. Now I want to talk about the boundaries, the proposed boundary changes. The map on the left shows the current Crescent attendance area, gray. The Lewis and Clark area is outlined in blue, and the College View area is outlined in red. That's on the left map. So the proposed changes for Crescent, the attendance area would be distributed to either Lewis and Clark or Lewis and Clark or College View, depending on address. Now this proposed change to the Crescent attendance boundary will be the first one since it was slightly expanded to the south prior to the 2011-2012 school year. That change was made after the closure of Dunn Elementary and the opening of College View Elementary. The board approved the boundary changes on February 23, 2010 for that 2011-2012 school year. And so Crescent absorbed all students from the Hoover attendance area residing north of Painesville Boulevard. With these proposed changes, our district will provide transportation to Lewis and Clark and College View, and that'll be based on their home address. If a family wants to attend a Council Bluffs school other than their assigned school, The transition request will be prioritized.
But like all in-district transfers, parents will be responsible for transportation. Finally, I'd like to talk about the addition of Crescent students to Lewis and Clark and College View. Besides being the two closest schools to Crescent, Lewis and Clark and College View are also under capacity. With the addition of Crescent,
Schools will have an average size of 23. That is just below our district goal of 24. Like Crescent, Lewis and Clark and College View use the same curricular materials and have the same programming, so we can promote coherence from school to school and from grade to grade. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion from board members?
Just quickly, Mark, you're saying that there's room to accept all the students as well as the teachers, correct? Incorporating them back into Lewis and Clark and Crescent, or and College View, and that would not exceed our district proposed average pupil per classroom, correct?
Correct. All the students that are currently enrolled at Crescent, proposed for next year, could be split between Lewis and Clark and College View, and then that class size average would still be 23 to 1, which would be under our district goal.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I have a quick question. I was going to save this for when we were going to vote, but I'll ask this now. So, the last meeting, there were a few parents that talked about that in the past they either had to transfer schools themselves or had students, and that was a struggle. In this situation, are there any additional, if we were to, vote on this and close Crescent, any additional support for these students, their first year, and, starting in a new school and everything in this situation?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Currently, we have mobility between our schools that happen throughout the school year. All districts have that, and a lot going from school to school. We have counselors, we have student family advocates that work with families and students, and we see a need arise that if any student's having some difficulty with that transition, there is support, immediate support provided for that child.
And maybe I thought last time we had said that Lewis and Clark and Crescent teachers currently do like coaching together, professional development together.
They do. They have, I think it's about every 6 weeks, 4 weeks. I'm not exactly sure on how often they get together, but they do meet remotely and on site. The two schools merge to do professional development on Mondays, on early release Mondays. Don't have the exact how many times they do that per month or per year.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hearing no additional questions from the board, we'll move on to the public comment portion. We did have several individuals request time this evening, and I will just kind of work down the line. It looks like most, if not all, of the individuals who requested time tonight requested on the topic of the Crescent school closure. So I'll go ahead and invite those individuals to make public comment now during our public hearing. After the public hearing, we will open the regular board meeting. There will be a public comment portion at that meeting as well. And that is the meeting at which we will take action on the resolution. So at this point, I will start with the list of individuals who've requested time this evening, starting with Justin Pritchett. Are you here, Justin? And individuals who requested time in advance of the meeting will receive 5 minutes.
Then anticipate being first. Good evening. I am Dr. Justin Pritchett. I believe you all are in receipt of my 65-page manifesto from the 17th. I hope you had a chance to peruse it. I want to start by admitting that I made some mistakes in my letter. I did. Most embarrassingly, I cited to the wrong statute regarding the process for appeal. You know, and as a budding lawyer, you hate to cite to the wrong statute. So please forgive me. However, I do find that my mistake is instructive. Because when we rush, we make mistakes. And this process was rushed as much as my letter was. And this proposal has as many mistakes, if not more, than my letter. Now, as you know, I submitted a public records request seeking all studies, research, data, communications, et cetera, regarding the proposal to close Crescent School. And the school district, very efficiently, very professionally, supplied me with the responsive documents. Somewhere in the neighborhood of around 200, give or take. I didn't count them specifically. And that was a lot of documents for me to go over in the 2 days I took before writing the letter. So I want to take a moment to address some of the things I might have overlooked in my letter. One, I don't know that I emphasized sufficiently how rushed this process has been. Now, I'm assuming that the documents that were produced by the school district were all of the responsive documents. And I didn't give a time limit in my request, which means that the first document that was produced is the first responsive one of February 16th. And then we know from the timeline that the first time this is presented to the board or is approached to the community is the 27th, right? There's some movement on the 24th, right? But we're looking at roughly 5 weeks from proposal to tonight's vote. My opinion, that's a rushed process. And this is relevant because, well, the law absolutely, undeniably allows you all to decide to close a school. That discretion is not unlimited, as I mentioned. A school district cannot make a decision that's unreasonable. That's not an abuse of discretion. And the Supreme Court in Iowa has defined that a decision is unreasonable when it is not based on substantial evidence. It's further gone on to define that substantial evidence is when a neutral, detached, and reasonable person would find it sufficient to establish the fact at issue, when the consequences are understood to be serious and great in importance. Serious and great in importance. Okay. Let's look at the evidence, right? So the school district tells us it's engaged in substantial efforts to grow enrollment. It tells us that enrollment continues to decrease, and it tells us the budget cannot support the school. Yet the folks here today, the ones that I had anticipated would have spoken first, so I apologize. They will tell you from their experience with the Crescent Community School Alliance and the other organizations that those assertions by the school district are in dispute. They'll tell you how the kindergarten and the first grade classes are the largest, suggesting growing enrollment. They'll tell you how the numbers proffered by the district in the budget don't add up. Now, like I said, I'm a philosopher and a budding lawyer. I don't know anything about numbers, so don't ask me about that. But the question for you is, in the face of competing facts, do you have the substantial evidence sufficient to determine a matter of great and serious importance?
Justin, that's 5.
I would suggest that you don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Sean Shea? Koza. Sean Shea.
Good evening. Hi. You know, I'm looking around the room and seeing the people that were here when I was first here. And actually is Mr. Kozer and Mr. Wilson. I think the first time Crescent went through this was in the fire, 2006, when you closed the school for 2 years and delayed the construction of the opening of the school. And the focus seems to be on enrollment. And I think this has been a trend since that time. You know, you've got a proposal here to change the bus routes to accommodate the 2 schools in Council Bluffs that'll benefit from the Crescent students. And we've been asking the board to change those bus routes. When Crescent was viable, we were Minster Springs, Monument Road, Lime Kiln. Feed those kids to us, and we've been asking that for years. That would fulfill the problem of 110 students to make us viable. But no, we couldn't get help doing that. That was in 13 and 14, you changed those bus routes. You know, and then 17, you announced we're going to close the school because of enrollment problems. Wow. So in 17, once we averted that disaster, we started that nonprofit, started fundraising, and we really felt that a preschool daycare would help our school, the natural feeder. Well, when we did the nonprofit, we fundraised. We've got money. I called HGM Engineering, talked to Ronnie Teacup. Hey, let's get an RFP for our preschool. I can't do that. You don't own the property. Sorry, I can't do that for you. We couldn't get any help. We couldn't even get an RFP to build the feeder that is in every other grade school in Council Bluffs, and we were going to finance it. Wow. You know, we didn't own the property. You know, I've been after budget information since 17. And you and I have had a couple discussions on the phone, and I appreciate your promise to get me specific information. And I've asked for specific information. And I've got emails that where I've asked specific questions, they've been avoided. And I don't understand that. But I've got some volunteers that I put together, and I'm going to take a close look at your budget, and I'm going to have some questions over the next few months. And we're going to get to the bottom of how these numbers stack up against Crescent. And I'm going to find out. I still haven't got the answer on the 950, the 935. How are you saving 935? And I really think it's you need the teachers in Council Bluffs, and you're going to close Crescent because you can't fill those spots unless you do. It's my 5 minutes up. I'd really like it to be. Okay, let's get this over with. Okay, so then you closed. I got a letter that went to Dr. Murillo in 2020, December 16th. It's an email. And Kids and Company was closed in 20. You guys haven't supported us in one area. You've got this community out here that is just, we can do it. What do you want us, what will you help us do? And that's my question. We've done everything, nonprofits, fundraised, we're ready to build a preschool. daycare. Where's my elected official? You know, I've served our county, I've served my city, I've spent 30 years in public service. And you are the person that decides, not the numbers, not the way you stack those numbers. And I'm looking for you to represent us.
Sean,
Okay.
that's it.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sean.
Mayor Chuck Hildreth.
Good late afternoon. Had to change a few things on my topics. We're going to do a history lesson. First of all, I need to make sure you know I'm not in favor of closing our school. I moved into town in 1985 with my business and moved to town in 2006. So I need to set that clear. I'm not in favor. I love our kids. So the question that I had a meeting with Dr. Murillo and Diane, and when this got hit on us, again, I got blindsided that, hey, we're going to try and close our school. And I said, well, you know, the rumor was, I've always heard from the day I moved to town, if they close the school, it's going to go back to the city. Wrong. Okay? So I spent a lot of time at the courthouse, and here's a quick history lesson. In January of 1958, the land from the school township of Crescent was purchased for $6,000 from the estate of Terry Henry. And that was to build a new school because the state required us to close the existing two-story wooden school we had and build a nice school. So we got the school built. Crescent built the school. So in April of 1966, the school township of Crescent merged with Council Bluffs, and it was mandated by the state legislation and the County Board of Education in Pot County. That's how we got together. At that time, the school township split our property between the school and the park. So at that time, on the deed, and I don't know if anybody's seen the deed to the park that the city owns, if it does not remain recreational, it goes back to the property owner, which would be Council Bluffs School. Okay? I guarantee you that park will never change. We will do nothing but keep the park. We just got a big grant. We're going to put $40,000 in our park for new equipment for our little kids. Okay? So that's the history of the school, done with, if it doesn't stay a school, it comes back to the city. No, it's the park. And I have the deeds for it. I'm going to make a big banner. I'm going to put it in our city hall so everybody can see that. Okay? So, that part's done. The other part is I received this letter that has some things about myself, my person, which I don't appreciate. I'm $100 a month as mayor. I spend 20 hours a week in our town. My gas bill is more than I make because I'm that guy. Okay, I've been a private person, a private owner. I don't like government stuff because it takes too long to get stuff done. I want it done today, not in 3 months. So the letter you received said the school district communication director exercised relief that there was no public forum held. She also even noted Mayor Hildreth seemed angry on behalf of his constituents. Didn't know we had to have a public forum. Don't know who this is. I will never be angry in Crescent. I make $100 a month. If I'm going to be angry, someone can have my job and I'll give my pay to them. Angry is when I open my Pottawatomie County taxes today, and they raised my taxes 13%. That was angry. Okay? The second statement that kind of hit me in the heart, the superintendent complained that Mayor Hildreth was sad and unprofessional with his advice that, I said, it's not fair to the kids or parents wondering every year if their school in Crescent will open or close. I stand by that statement. It's not fair. Which brings me to a little bit, then I'll be done. If you close it, Crescent gave Council Bluffs the school that we built. I want it back. If I could just have 30 seconds, I'd like 30 seconds. Unprofessional has hit me pretty hard. I didn't think it was I was unprofessional when I took my hand and shook Dr. Murillo's hand and Diane and said, hey, I'm Mayor Chuck. Sorry I'm late. I had to help my neighbor fix his trailer. I didn't think it was unprofessional when Dr. Murillo and I talked about my daughter, who's a teacher in Independence, who's going through a situation where they're going from a 5-day to 4-year. 5 days to 4 days. I didn't think that was unprofessional. And I didn't think it was unprofessional of me when I shook their hands when they left. And I said, thanks for giving me a heads up. You're going to have a tough job ahead of you. I'm not unprofessional. I might not be educated enough, but I'm not unprofessional. And that hit me in the heart.
Sharon Omek.
Hard to follow that heartfelt presentation, but I realize that these are difficult times for the public school systems with the new savings account legislation. I would ask that your fear about the impact of the legislation does not drive your decision. I really appreciate the presentation tonight, but I really would have been more pleased if some of these discrepancies in data had been addressed. I think there was sufficient time for that. There were discrepancies with the number of eligible pre-K people in our community. We provided tons of documentation from that that showed that there were 12 kids that were willing to come to pre-K. There's discrepancy on their per pupil costs. I appreciate Dr. Murillo getting back to me, but it didn't address the issue that I pulled all that data from the state on each individual elementary school. I don't know where the 9,000 comes from, but the average is more like 14,000 to 17,000. So in fact, Crescent is not a 47% increase in cost per pupil. It's anywhere between 15 to 20%. That's a big difference. And I just wish it had been addressed. The two justifications by the administration that the district could save $935,000 and that it made significant efforts to grow Crescent over the past 5 years without results. There are inconsistencies in both of these theories. As shown, staff will be absorbed by the district if Crescent is closed, and so the only potential cost savings would be non-personnel, which would be a maximum of $400,000 a year, and that would be offset by busing costs. Additionally, the reduced property valuations resulting from a school closure would mean an additional loss of school tax revenue of $175,000 a year, because it's estimated as about a 10% loss in valuation. So alternately, in 2017, it was stated that the cost savings from a Crescent school closure would be $180,000 per year. So quite a difference, $180, $935. So how can this discrepancy be resolved? The loss of a magnet school had a very detrimental impact on Crescent. As presented previously, The Project Lead the Way only was in existence at Crescent for a year and a half, and there was no marketing or public exposure about Public Lead the Way at Crescent Elementary to draw new students. It was never touted as what it was. Would you consider these actions significant effort? I do not. Project Lead the Way is relatively expensive and requires in-depth training of all staff. The turnover of staff was given as the reason for dropping the commitment to Crescent. Teacher turnover is a district issue, not a Crescent issue. If there had been discussions with the community about the proposed STEM program ahead of time, we could have informed the administration that historically, Crescent has been a training ground for teachers and administrators. Rather than drop the STEM commitment, it would have been easy to offer less intensive science or math curriculum. After speaking with national educators at the consulting firm of Schoolworks, it's my understanding that Project Lead the Way is generally not offered to elementary schools, but rather high schools. Why was there no accountability for losing the magnet school concept for Crescent? If cost savings and efforts by the district are not the reasons for the closure, what is? It feels like there is an us versus them culture proliferated, especially given that the 2017 administrative dream team was kept in place, unbeknownst to Dr. Morello, but it's the same people that tried to close this down before. The enrollment was directly impacted by repeated departures of principals, teachers, the flood, and COVID. Rather than really falling for 7 years, as the district stated, enrollment actually rose 2 years, but has remained relatively flat. It's not reasonable to examine enrollment now as indicative of future growth. As was indicated before, the kindergarten and first grade classes are the largest classes in the school. The board also mentioned how difficult it was to close Walnut Grove School in Council Bluffs. The difference with the current proposal is twofold. First, Walnut Grove is located within the Council Bluffs community, whereas Crescent Elementary is located in the city of Crescent. Walnut Grove students needed merely to be relocated within their hometown. Each Crescent Elementary class will be split up between two schools and with bus rides over 40 minutes each trip.
Sharon, that's 5.
Is that it? Thank you for allowing me.
Go ahead and finish up, Sharon.
Is that, let's see. Let me just see if there's anything. I just want to restate that we have growth in the community. I know you questioned whether the housing costs were too high. 2 of the 9 houses are occupied by young families, and they're building lower income families on the rest of the development. I'm concerned about the lack of trust going forward, and that those students already lost due to the open enrollment due to the timing of this proposal. We had a glimmer of hope with our previous principal that with a dedicated principal, great things can happen in a short time. When combined with open communication with the community and a willingness to work with effective strategies, enrollment can gain momentum. A temporary lease that could revert back to the district is not anything that we are interested in, and the trust will have been eroded by that time. If you do not want Crescent as an attendance center for Council Bluffs, then I would respectfully ask that you consider offering it to the school, to the city. Thank you for allowing me to present my views.
Michelle Hargens.
Good evening. I come to you with a solution to your main focus regarding enrollment numbers and money. But first, I wish someone would have said something about, hey, things are starting to go down the wrong path. Let's see what we can do before we have to consider closing Crescent Elementary, especially when it comes to handling a budget, being proactive rather than coming to where we are today. According to education research, the earliest that schools, businesses will bounce back from COVID is 2025, not just Crescent Elementary. I spoke to the board, the state of Iowa Department of Education. Has anyone checked out the enrollment shifts they have predicted? And they could not give me a definite answer. How about under Iowa Code 2023, Chapter 275, subsection 32, reorganization of school districts? Under this section, it talks about scope of surveys. Just one point I'm going to bring up in making sure all the following matters are included is economic factors. Under another section, 275.3, minimum size, that the director or superintendent of the board shall have the authority to grant permission to approve the information or enlargement of a school district containing a lower school enrollment than required in this section on the written request of such area. Education agency board, if such, there is accompanied evidence tending to show that sparsity of population, natural barriers, or other good reasons make it impractical to meet the school enrollment requirement. Under 274, studies, surveys, and plans. In developing studies, the board shall consult with the officials in the school district and other citizens, shall from time to time hold public hearings, and may employ such research and other assistance to determine reasonably necessary in order to carry on a survey and prepare definite plans of reorganizations. I believe this has been asked by the citizens of Crescent back in 2017. Cutting jobs. We don't need to start at the bottom. We need our teachers. We need our paras. How about we start with the administration? I think some of those jobs could be combined together. I cannot believe a board would be okay with closing a school in a small community and making them mad rather than cutting people within their own network. I mean, Crescent is easy, but it should be a hard decision based on asking yourself, did we actually follow through and help Crescent to the best of our abilities? And no, you did not. Now I'm going to talk to you about the little girl inside of me who went to Crescent Elementary. See, I was the girl who walked from the school to the fire barn because I was in brownies. I remember getting thrown off the merry-go-round and trying harder the next time to hang on when we played games of who could stay on the longest. I even remember the principal's office and the windowsill that had a wooden paddle with holes in it. Yes, I'm that old. The same tire swings are still there. I remember the teachers who believed in me when I struggled in math. They made such an impact on me. I grew up on Limekill Road, and when there was a lot of snow, the bus would usually slide into the ditch, and us kids would cheer because we would be excused for being late to school. I have a lot of the same friends and are still in the same circle, and we talk about our lives. Those are just some of my great memories. I even have my ribbons from field day. I'll read you a letter in just a minute, but I wrote a letter back when I was in Crescent Elementary, why I like Crescent School. I actually got an honorable mention for it. I like our school because I have lots of friends. I like the school's playground. It is a pretty place. I like to play here. I like the things we do. I like the teachers very much. I like the name of our school. It is fun to sing and music because we get to pick our own songs. This upcoming winter, my husband and I were planning to donate lights, Christmas lights, to put them on the pine tree right by City Hall. Then we would have the Crescent children walk down to the tree and help decorate it with ornaments they would make from the PTO event. I am telling you all this because I want the children of Crescent and the community to have great memories like I did. They deserve it. We all deserve to have those memories, not the ones of educators saying you don't matter, your school doesn't matter. Please, I ask you not to close our school. I will personally go on record today to say I'll work right along with you and your committees to help enrollment and help figure this out. We can do this together. I know you have to get your budget turned in very soon. Please step back and see where else the cuts can come from. Money issues never go away. Memories last forever. And I thank you for your time.
Oh, you just handed the dean. Thank you. Shannon Zordell.
Hi, my name is Shayna Zordell. I'm at 513 Iowa Avenue. I wanted to talk a little bit about my reaction to the last school board meeting, where a list of efforts were made, and also tonight, to increase the enrollment of Crescent Elementary. I feel like some things were missed, just like others in this room. I feel like some of the efforts have had positive effects, but others were short-term and left promises unfulfilled. I feel like some just lasted long enough to make it to a presentation slide, but not to produce real results. The district said a preschool couldn't open because they had commitment from only 3 students. By now, you've seen the data and parent survey responses showing the 12 families who expressed an interest after the one and only open house that I understood took place. And had a preschool actually been opened, it would have only grown from there. The local organization has continued to fundraise and work towards starting a preschool, but have been turned away by the district in the subsequent years after that open house. These details were left out of the presentation. The district said the Science Magnet pilot program did not work there. This is the result I would expect after an initiative is dropped in its second year. There was a good reason for it, the pandemic, but that's the same topic we're supposed to turn a blind eye to when looking at Crescent's enrollment data. In fact, a number of these district efforts were dropped, including community outreach and meetings with the local organization. Before and after school care was started after that community organization asserted this disparity. Members of that organization have shared they enjoyed working with Mark, but have not had any type of contact with him for over 3 years. Another detail that was omitted in the presentation. Community efforts and meetings have been ongoing, but from within the community itself. By now you've heard from our PTO, a talented and invested group with a strong commitment to the future of our school. They have concrete goals and are ready to implement action steps. They have asked you as a board to look to the future and believe that with district support, we can maintain the momentum with Crescent's growing community. Imagine the possibilities with this level of participation. The district said they lost over 400 students due to COVID and have only gotten a handful back. Don't take our kids from Crescent to make up for those losses. Boundary shifts were made multiple times in the past that were not designed to help Crescent's enrollment and have been yet another mountain to climb. We heard of the branding promotion efforts, but to that I would ask, how can a hashtag compete with a major publicity coverage over the closure of our school for many years? We heard the argument to right-size the district and the disparity in per pupil costs, showing that Crescent students are above the average. I say that it is fair to have a school with smaller class sizes in your district. Why? Because you are providing the school for a different group of kids. We're not all the same. You are supporting the diversity in your district, from the rural farm kids to those from Council Bluffs looking for a different environment. By design, Crescent is a smaller school, and that is okay. Don't oversimplify this diversity. Keeping Crescent open gives kids and families in Crescent and Council Bluffs a choice. Don't take away their choices. All the other cost-saving measures shared by the district touch the students so indirectly, but for this one suggestion of closing Crescent School. In this, you cut the people where it hurts the most. It bears repeating that the community bought and paid for that school from the donated land to the brick and mortar structure. They delivered these assets into the trust and care of the city of Council Bluffs. Historically, they've paid for that school and should be involved from the ground up in any discussions about the future of their school. You should have a more complete picture of Crescent Elementary by now, beyond what the district is putting out in their Q&A sheet, and certainly enough information to, at the very least, realize that a rushed vote to close Crescent Elementary is premature and frankly wrong. We are overcoming the challenges of the past: fire, flood, no preschool, pandemic, boundary changes, and school closure threats, to name a few, and are now seeing an increase in the incoming enrollment numbers with our largest classes in kindergarten and first grade. There is more work that can still be done if you invite us to the table and join us in the process.
Deborah Overturf.
Hi. I want to just say something from the Iowa Department of Education, best practices. You know, that whenever you consider closing a school, you look at financial, and you have to look at non-financial aspects. The school closure decision is one of the most difficult a school board must make. Both economic and non-economic factors must be considered. And here's the kicker: extensive community participation must be achieved. I don't think that has happened here. Another thing it says, the board shall inform segments of the community within its district that the matter is under consideration by the board. This shall be done in a manner reasonably calculated to apprise the public of that information. By the time our community heard, teachers had already been offered reassignments, boundary had already been put up for change, new schools had been listed to choose from. All these things were already decided on, and that was without community participation. That's a big deal. The board shall seek another thing in the Iowa Department of Education says here is, the board shall seek public input in all study and planning steps involved in making the decisions. But I think instead of being involved in all of the study and planning steps, we weren't really involved in any. Zero, and I don't think that's right. That's what I wanted to say about this issue. It's just one other factor. Thank you.
Jill Koob.
Hello, good evening. I appreciate all the time that you've given us this far to listen to our emails and have this open discussion today. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Crescent PTO, my family, our community. And you've heard a lot about the budgeting. You've heard about the cost savings, the community issues, the data from the past, and what we foresee to be the future. But I want to take another approach, and one that unites the past ideas with our future visions. I've been working with the Crescent PTO for 2 years. Last week, I emailed a lot of you a lot of links so you could see some of the things that we've already addressed or that we've already done in this short amount of time. During the 22-23 school year, we set out with 3 goals. The first one, to engage with our Crescent students, their families and teachers and staff. The second one, to connect with the greater Crescent community for connection, increased future enrollment. And the third, to give back to our community when possible by supporting local businesses. I'll just list a few events that you saw in those links that we've already done in this short amount of time. The first one being our Welcome Back picnic that we held, our Truck or Treat, our food pantry drives, our Stop, Shop, and Support Crescent to help the businesses, cookies and crafts, Grandparents' Day. So you got to see a lot of interaction there, and you also were provided with the numbers of people that we brought in the community in hoping to push that enrollment. So we share all this because at the end of every single event, our families thank the PTO and the staff, and they share their appreciation for the connection to the school and their community families. We believe that there's a strong correlation between these hosted events and the increase of incoming enrollment. Now take what you've seen so far and imagine what we could do with a committee that had the support of the school board. In this committee, we could take the ideas from the leaders before us and flourish them further and come up with more ideas on top of that. And with that, it would give us that time to develop those new ideas. So we'll continue to push enrollment. We're going to get out there and call. We're going to connect with the parents and show them why they should choose Crescent. We know that we can build a team of individuals within the school community to contribute to this vision, what we have built so far. So we'd like to propose these new ideas, maybe testing new programs, classroom tools, lesson styles, activities, bringing in a variety of teachers to test these things in smaller class sizes, may be more feasible and have more concentrated, detailed data. And we propose these ideas to get more community businesses in touch with our students to see what we have in the Crescent community. So in summary here, we are here to reach out to connect all of our forces here together and capture the outcome that we all want. We want to choose Crescent, we want to build our community and work on that together. So thank you for your time.
Clint Bruno? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah. My name's Clint Bruno. I'm representing Golden Hills, the second phase. I've heard some talk about some of the construction and homes. I guess what I'm hearing is people think that the prices of the homes are too much, they're not going to attract families. What I can tell you is that the 9 homes that we do have sold or under contract for them are families. What we have moving forward is going to be, you know, a $425,000 plus home. Not, I would agree that it's not real conducive to young families. But with the remaining 13 lots, the plan is to drive the price point down and attract them families. I mean, that's the direction we need to head to survive. Also, I can tell you that we have actively been looking for another site in Crescent to develop, and we're looking at a more affordable component. We've noticed that we've got a lot of Omaha traffic, families that are coming across the bridge. Sorry, I'm nervous. I get terrible public speaking. But there's been a lot of people coming across the bridge, a lot of families that we've had to turn away, that we couldn't do something with. So we said, you know what, we can do something here, and Crescent offers what these people are looking for: quick access to downtown Omaha, quick access to West Omaha, and we think we can buy and build still an affordable component in Crescent, and that's the direction we're going to head after we're done where we're at. That is all. Thanks.
Brian Shea? Good evening.
Guys, I grew up in Crescent. I went to Crescent School way back in the 60s. Neat little town. If you've ever gone out there, which I'm sure most of you have, we've got a lot of economic development coming. Clint was just up here talking about the houses. We were here before and talked about housing up there, and we've built, I think, 6 other homes besides the 16 that are up there now, and he's got more coming. Our businesses are booming. Our ski hills is booming. Every little restaurant and everything. We've brought in some construction companies. We rebuilt our Casey store. We also got a Dollar General. might be funny to you, but when you live out there and you got to go get a gallon of milk or something, that's a big deal. But it's economics, and it's the tax base that we really needed for this. And we are working on it. We said we'd work on it, and we're going to that. We had the fire. Then we had the 2011 flood, which wiped out almost all the homes down on the, we call them the bottoms. It's down on the flat part towards the river. We lost almost all those families down there. There was a buyout program to buy those out. What was left in the 19 flood, they took most of the rest of those out. So we've lost a lot with that. But one of the things that nobody's talked about is every time there's a house for sale out there, it goes fast. It really goes fast. We in Crescent are you see these people, I know most of these people. And I was mayor out there for a lot of years. I didn't know Chuck made so much. But we are aiming for something, and we are growing out there, whether we like it or not. That school is needed in our community, and it's a big part of Council Bluffs' school system. So I urge you to keep the school. Let us work it a little more. We've had many setbacks, and it's important we keep going. I know budgeting's tough. We all know that. It's just, everything's tough right now, and it's tight. So I appreciate your time. Thank you, guys.
Jeff Hutchinson.
Good evening. Jeff Hutchison. Currently live at 210 Mount Vernon. Formerly lived in Crescent, 3 Valley Drive, which is now 817 Valley Drive. Keeps changing. City's growing. So the mayor talked about history. I'm going to give you a really short history lesson and a couple of other points. At the informational meeting 2 weeks ago, Mr. Schultz presented a graphic showing the numbers of Crescent students who open enrolled in either other districts or other Council Bluffs community schools, explaining that those not attending Crescent did so through a conscious and voluntary act by parents. He left out at least one other reason, though. My wife and I moved to Crescent in 1984. One of the reasons we chose the house we did was because we could see the school from our front porch. Thought it'd be really cool to be able to watch our kids walk to school, which we did. 1991, our oldest child started at Crescent in kindergarten. First grade, at the very first parent-teacher conference in first grade, the teacher said, we're going to move him into second grade because he's bored and disruptive and doesn't need to be in first grade. He was already the youngest kid in first, or doesn't need, already the youngest kid in the first grade. We're not going to put him in second grade as the really youngest kid. So we were told he needed to be in the tag program. We thought that was great. The problem was, because he wasn't in fourth grade, we couldn't put him in the tag program without moving back to Council Bluffs, school district rules. So we were forced to sell our house, move back to Council Bluffs. We offered to bus him, offered to drive him, said absolutely not. He has to be in fourth grade. He has to be enrolled in one of the home schools for the two tag schools, which at the time were Hoover and Bloomer. He did enroll, we did move, he did enroll in the tag program, did very, very well, was not disruptive and was not bored. We wouldn't have left. We would probably still be in Crescent someplace. Again, the district forced at least one student to move from the home Crescent School District back into Council Bluffs. Part two. Also at that meeting, Mr. Schultz stated there had never been a successful Kids and Company program at Crescent School. That aforementioned child was enrolled in that Kids and Company program. So we did at one time have a very successful Kids and Company program in Crescent. Third, the graphic that he showed, showing that 50% of the students who are eligible to enroll in Crescent don't, is great graphic, but to be fair, shouldn't we see that same graphic for the other 9 schools? Because I can't believe that Crescent parents are the only ones who are voluntarily enrolling their students in other Council Bluffs schools or other school districts. Finally, has the district taken the time to consider the impact of the additional students who will now be enrolled at Lewis and Clark and at College View? We live 2.5 blocks from Lewis and Clark School right now. On any given day, there's a line of 30 to 40 cars on Marshall Avenue, one of the busiest streets in that part of town, waiting to pick up their kids. They are illegally parked on Marshall, creating a one-way, one-lane travel portion of the street for 2.5 blocks. Now you're considering adding potentially 10 to 20 more cars every day to that line of cars. Right now, the line of cars goes from Lewis and Clark to Mount Vernon, sometimes on a bad day, almost to Elliott. You're going to add 10 to 20 more cars. You're going to take it all the way back to Morgan or beyond. How we have not had a disaster accident-wise yet is beyond me. So I just ask that you take time to consider all the ramifications of moving an additional number, 64, 70, however many students to those two schools. If you drive out to College View, when school's letting out, you'll see the exact same situation with the traffic. Thank you.
I believe that was everyone who requested time this evening for the public hearing. But if there are one or two more people who would like to speak, I'll allow that. Go ahead and come to the microphone, please.
Hi, I'm Bethany DeCarolis, and I live on Military Avenue in Council Bluffs. So I actually don't have any connection to Crescent, but I came to the March 14th board meeting because the potential elementary school closure seemed like an important issue, and I wanted to be informed. Going into the meeting, I thought keeping the building open for 60 students would be hard to justify, but after the meeting, I realized I'd been thinking about it wrong. So I don't know if it's a fait accompli that you are going to vote to close it, but I'm here to share my thoughts with you, so thank you. At the last board meeting, the ways that the district attempted to increase enrollment at Crescent were discussed. Now, my family does in-district transfers to send our kids to TJ, because my husband is a TJ alum and he has this weird thing called school pride. And every year when we're filling out the paperwork, I'm reminded that an in-district transfer request is not guaranteed. So I am wondering if the district's goal was to increase enrollment at Crescent, why approve in-district transfers out of Crescent? I do understand that many families in Crescent are choosing to send their middle schoolers and high schoolers to other districts such as Underwood. And just as I don't blame my husband's former classmates for not sending their kids to TJ, I can understand why Crescent families are open enrolling out of Council Bluffs. So these are some numbers I got off the Iowa Department of Education website, the 2022 school performance profiles. So the state average for overall performance is 54.65. Looking at the middle schools, Underwood, 63.58. Kern, 51.85. Wilson, 50.39. Looking at the high schools, Underwood, 61.79. AL, 48.7. And TJ, 41.81. And Underwood went through the same pandemic we did. But as I said, I'd been thinking about it wrong. So at the last board meeting, Dr. Murillo reminded us that the kids need to be at the center of this decision. I also heard the board say they are concerned about the Crescent community and open to letting the town continue to use the building. And I know the district is comfortable losing money on real estate deals. So I propose two ideas for consideration. Could Crescent join the Underwood Community School District? You know, the population of Underwood in the 2020 census was 954, and the district enrollment is 799. They are obviously a very attractive choice for Iowa families and likely could be trusted to put the building to great use. A second great idea. The Crescent nonprofit should start a private school. At the last board meeting, it was stated that the budget for Crescent was $900,000. If the families of 120 kids pool their $7,500 in education spending accounts, that would cover it. And this would actually be win-win because Council Bluffs would get $1,200 per pupil in categorical funding for students in the district who enroll in public schools.
Bethany, it's time.
That was 5?
It's
You
3.
can go ahead and finish.
I emailed you this morning to ask.
You can go ahead and finish.
I realize this is a complex issue, and I might not understand all the nuances, but by my calculation, that's $142,000 for kids that you wouldn't even have to provide services for. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this public hearing and call to order the regular business meeting of the Council Bluffs Community School District Board of Education. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Kazire. Mr. Arthur.
Here.
Ms. Shudek.
Here.
Ms. Myers.
Here.
Mr. Peters.
Here.
Mr. Tripp.
Here.
Mr. LaFurla.
Present. And now please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. That brings us to approval of our agenda. Is there a motion?
I move approval of our agenda as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the agenda has been approved. Next is approval of the minutes of the work session and workshop meetings of March 14th, 2023. Is there a motion?
I can move to approve the minutes of the work session and the workshop meeting of March 14th, 2023 as presented.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the minutes have been approved. Next is public participation. I believe we had all of the individuals who requested time this evening speak during the public hearing. So we will move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. LaFurla. At this time, this evening, we do not have any additional reports.
Thank you. We will move on to our resolutions, beginning with setting a date for the public hearing on the 2023-24 school budget.
Move the board schedule a public hearing on April 11th of 2023 to review the 23-24 school budget.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the public hearing? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes, the motion carries. Next, we have approval of K-5 English Language Arts instructional materials. Is there a motion?
I can move that the board approves the purchase of K-5 English Language Art instructional materials as presented.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this item?
And this is our regular curriculum replacement cycle.
And then you put on this, you had budget source, had some funds coming from special education budget, others from teaching and learning. So almost kind of splitting that cost between the two. Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes. And the resolution to approve the language arts instructional materials is approved. Next, we have approval of a contract for SOAR in the high school academy. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves the contract with Education Solutions Northwest for professional development and instructional services as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Motion and a second. Discussion?
I think we should at least share this. So contract provide high school math teachers and specialists intense professional development around best teaching in math and English language arts while offering incoming ninth graders, students at Thomas Jefferson High School, an opportunity to engage with math and ELA through the pedagogical approaches practiced during the academy. This helps students prepare for the academic expectations of ninth grade, develop understanding and confidence with math ELA concepts through the use of tools and activities designed for incoming ninth grade students, and connect and establish positive relationships with high school staff while becoming familiar with the school. Program offered with funds designated for Thomas Jefferson High School through Title I School Improvement. And is there anything else you'd share on it?
This is the model we used last year at the middle school level. And it was very successful, and our teachers really appreciated the professional development. It also allowed our students to kind of have that jump start into middle school. We are offering that one more time this year, and 100% of our teachers are returning. So we really felt like it would be a really good model for us now to take up to the high school level. And our teachers at Thomas Jefferson have agreed to participate, and now we are looking at inviting 8th grade students if the board approves this board item tonight.
And I would say, Dr. Merle and I just had a conversation about this. And I've been concerned for some time about the academic rigor and the results at Thomas Jefferson. And I appreciate that not only that the district is making this a focus, but the teachers also are engaging in this academy to try to grow their skills through some of these best practices that we hope to engage students, I think, in a different way than we have at the high school.
Yes.
So thank you.
And Thomas Jefferson is a Title I school, so we are using Title I dollars to fund this.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Ms. Shudek?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes. And the motion carries. Next is resolution for middle school math camp and professional development. Is there a motion?
I'll move the board approves the contract with Educational Solutions Northwest for professional development and instructional services.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions?
Very similar to what we just assessed, except for this one is for math.
Yes.
And paid for out of the ESSER and art funds.
Yes. And one thing I didn't mention about the model is that the students are there a half day and have lunch and then go home. So our teachers are really working with professionals that are modeling how to drive this resource that aligns to our curriculum. And then in the afternoon, our teachers then are in professional development and learning and taking what they saw in the morning, having conversations around it. They're also working through a full unit and how to plan that unit. And it's just some really good professional development plus opportunities for our students.
Any other questions? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Ms. Shudek?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes. Next, we have a resolution to close Crescent Elementary School. Is there a motion?
I move that the board approves the recommendation to close Crescent Elementary School at the end of the 2022-2023 school year.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion?
Yes, I wouldn't mind following up on some of the questions. I think, we've all received a number of letters from the public, as well as had conversation with folks, and then we had some eloquent speakers here today, and I know there's some questions that come out of this. And I just want to ask, one of the first ones I think I asked you before was kind of what was it that caused a rush in the process here from when we found out about budget till now? I feel like is a good discussion to have.
I'm not sure I agree with the rush.
Okay.
I think this is something that each year the board has talked about the enrollment out at Crescent. And we have discussed that, but knowing when the pandemic came and we were awarded the ESSER dollars, that we could kind of continue to support it through that time period. But the ESSER and the ARP dollars have come to a close. And with the loss of students, and then with the additional funding that we received during the pandemic, that is where we now came to the point this year where we had to look at the 3.8 deficit that we are in. With the loss of students, that drives enrollment, which drives our dollars. And so that is why this year, as we began to talk about budgets, and that began before Christmas, before the December, and then with the board, we began to discuss it in January. And looking at what cost-saving measures can we take to try to reduce our budget to match with the state funding.
So your team was looking at these, kind of how do we do these cost-saving measures, put together a group of proposals.
We did.
And this was included, one of those was presented in February.
That is true.
And I know that there's this kind of question about the costs, and we did, as an effort, because we were told by the public that we weren't providing, I think through the fire and through the recovery from that, we had gone to shared classes and shared principles and all these things that, people were saying, hey, it doesn't help, the situation. And so we were able to then fund that fully for a while, where we had both a dedicated principal and dedicated teachers for each class. And then coming through ESSER, we were able to keep funding that. And then we got to the end of it, and suddenly that was kind of not sustainable.
That is correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
And when I arrived, it was important for me to try to support and grow that enrollment. It really was. And there was a lot of meetings that we had, and with the community committee as we worked through that. What I heard first was, they won't stay because they think they're going to close in 2 years. And so we guaranteed, and right now we're sitting at year 6 that I've been here. So we had a kindergarten class that's gone all the way through, right? And I kept telling them, as if we can increase the enrollment, we don't have to worry about the closure. The second piece that we talked about that I received was they don't want to have split classrooms. So you won't grow enrollment if you have split classrooms. So when the pandemic hit and we went to a virtual academy, I knew that was another opportunity to move us out of the split classrooms into single section classrooms. From there, I also felt like it was important to take care of the interior. And we put new carpeting, I painted the exterior, we did some landscaping to make that look inviting, to try to welcome the community back. We did add Kids & Co., and we have Kids & Co. there currently, correct?
Yeah.
So that never went away. And so that is something that has been in place. And despite all of the efforts, we have seen the decrease, which I really am sorry that that happened. But that is what, through the efforts, that's where we've been. So I feel like it wasn't a rush decision, but we have done as much as we could as a district to try to grow that school.
In this kind of financial situation the district's come in, really has been around through this kind of loss of students.
Yes.
That just have, some have just seemingly disappeared through the pandemic. And then now with kind of as funding has, as inflationary costs have increased and funding's where it at, suddenly, the district watches a financial measure, it's spending authority, in that measure the state wants you to stay within certain guidelines. And that suddenly is a key factor for us to try to make sure we're within those guidelines.
Yes.
Which has driven this, but, even if it's not a loss in enrollment, it's certainly a flatline enrollment, over time. Yeah. Go for it.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I just, it needs to be said when we're talking about this, right? It's been years of underfunding from the state of Iowa, right? Even if enrollment stayed flat, we're not being funded by the state where we need to be as a state across the whole, right? So this isn't Crescent specific, this is Constable Schools, this is Lewis Central, this is Underwood. We're not getting the funding that the public education system needs in order to sustain this. And this isn't a year one problem. This is a multiple year problem. And I think the ESSER funds that came in really, it put the blinders on, because all these districts thought they had all this, hey, we got this money, we're gonna do all these projects, things of that nature. I know in speaking with people in the community, it's, you're doing this project, you're doing that project. Those funds come with very specific guidelines as to how you can spend that money. We can't use that money to keep a school open or to pay for salaries or things of that nature. And as we talk through different budget things, I know I get questions by friends and family like, hey, you just approved this or you just approved that. And it's all the different limitations that are put on for our money that we have from the state of Iowa as well.
That's correct.
So I wasn't on the board the last time this came around, but I believe previously at that time there was 88 children in the school the last time that this was up. And it was we're going to grow, we're going to, and I don't take I know that there was a flood. I know that there was a pandemic, things of that nature. But those are life events that affect everybody in the district, right? That flood hit the west end of town as well. And so we have to look at it as a whole district, I guess is where I'm going. Sorry to cut you off.
No, I
but-
think you're fine. And, the flood actually affected, I mean, it's the water in the Walnut Grove building was actually the mold issue and things like that. Some of that was caused by flooding. I know that was brought up about the savings that occurred since the last time we talked also. And I think that time, that 180 savings was because we had shared employees and a shared principal. And we've kind of we've expanded the cost by trying to support as much as we could. And the community's already said that going back, having those shares things didn't help. So I feel like even if we're trying to cost save by saying, let's go back to that, I don't feel like that's in the best interest of Crescent, if that's a consideration. I did wonder about kids and company. I hope it's okay if I ask a lot of questions. Kids and company was brought up, Chris. You inherently have some insight into kids and company. What does that look like normally at Crescent? If you can talk to me about what services are provided there.
Well, I mean, before and after school care, the numbers are low, but we knew that going into it, and I looked at offering a program there as being, it doesn't break even, so we keep it open because it's a service, and that's okay.
Right.
But staffing wise, it's difficult to keep it open.
And how many? I mean, is there a lot of kids who use the kids and company before and after, or is that a number that's
Across all the programs?
Here at Crescent, is it?
Oh, it varies it's a really small number. Some days it's 4 kids and some days it's 8 kids, but
A handful. Okay.
it every day it's a little bit different, and before and after school is different, but
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I'll have some other questions, but I'll let
Right, no,
people
I had
ask.
one
Yeah.
clarification on the cost savings. I have heard a lot, and I know all of us have heard and read both, that there's a cost savings of about $935,000. Can you clarify to me that's, from what I recall, is because we're able to infill all that staff into currently open positions? We're not creating a new job. They're able to, we've kept open positions in case this does happen, so that they're filling in from there, correct?
Yes.
That's where most of
So
this cost savings is
Cost
coming?
savings is 911,000. There's an extra almost 25,000 that comes along with special education, some services of teachers that go out there just for certain kids. And we separated those two because we felt like it was a better way to explain it. For the principal and the teachers that are there and the support staff, they will fill open positions that we currently have. We will not have them come back and add them to schools to make the staffing bigger. They will be filling positions we currently have open. So there is no additional cost for those. Those are positions that we would have to offer because of the size of the classes or the size of the section or the size of the school. That is what we will fill.
Okay, and teachers' contracts come out generally around this time. And so that's why those are left open, because of this potential, and they grab them. Okay.
Right, okay.
It was brought up about per pupil cost. I think Sharon had brought up per pupil cost discrepancies, and I've seen that a number of times. And I thought that was something to do with sped cost. Maybe you can clarify what that difference is in the.
So, Mark, do you want to join me on this, or? The per pupil cost that we have is the amount of dollars, how you get your per pupil cost, and Dean, you can correct me too if I'm wrong, is that you take the number of students in a building and then how much you spill down that building and you divide. And when you have the number of students that we have there and we divide it by the 911, that's where you get that number. For our other students, excluding the special ed services that we have in our other buildings, and we divide that by the amount of money that's spent on that building, that's where we get that cost.
You're saying
So
despite
that's why
that,
there's a 40% difference.
because we don't have sped services that we offer there.
We do
or-
have sped service, but we also have special education, special programs.
Oh.
Where we have bigger programs in some schools versus the other. That's why we didn't want to add the confusion, and we pulled the special education off because we have a very small number at Crescent.
It inflates the.
Yes.
Okay. So that number, 13.8 versus 7,300, 9,300 is an accurate number.
It is an accurate
Based
number.
on actual cost minus those sped programs?
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually like, it's more apples to apples from the general fund and excluding the special education services. We have special programs at certain sites that are district programs that aren't necessarily the school's program, but they're housed there. And so looking at that special education money, you get, it's, you can't compare it. So
We also
We
have
also
students-
ask for additional spending authority every year for unfunded special education services,
To
so.
the tune of $2.3 million.
And we also have students that are housed at schools that aren't our students, that are from outside districts, correct?
That's correct.
Do we have some of those from Underwood, just curious? I assume we have kids from everywhere in southwest Iowa. Yeah. Okay. I guess I would have a question. The magnet school that was out there, was kind of when and why that got dropped, if that can be something I can ask, and then, yeah, start there.
Yeah. So Mark will explain the project Lead the Way.
I'll just put a chair up here.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, Project Lead the Way, it's not a magnet program, it's curriculum. And it's really designed to focus more on math and science and to help students explore those concepts in different ways. I'm not aware that the district ever stated that it would be a magnet school, and I'm not really versed in magnet schools, but they're significantly different. So Project Lead the Way was curriculum that was implemented at the school. We thought it would help because it would make it unique. No other elementary school had it. And so if parents were looking around and shopping around schools, it's something that Crescent had that no other school offered.
So just to be clear, Project Lead the Way does have middle and high school age curriculum, but also elementary school year
It
curriculum.
does, it does. And the problem is, and it's unfortunate, when we have teachers turn over, we would train a teacher, and it's pretty significant amount of time to get the training to be able to actually implement the curriculum. And once we did that, we would have teachers turning over each year. And so then we wouldn't have to get another teacher on board and trained. We can't require teachers to stay at school. You know, we have one-year contracts, and teachers make some decisions each year. So that was a hardship for us. And then the pandemic came in, and it was even more of a hardship.
And we've talked about that even at the high school level, just earlier, talking about PLTW and trying to get teachers so we can offer other classes and kind of continuity in the curriculum, so.
Yeah, and Project Lead the Way at elementary is called Launch. At the middle school, it's called Gateway. And then at the high school, we just call it PLTW.
Okay.
I had a question as far as for principals, because that's been brought up a couple times, that there's not as much, continuity of our principals at Crescent year to year, but that's an issue that's kind of across the district, correct?
Well,
As far-
I would say yes and no. When I got here, we had only a part-time person there, and I was very concerned that if something happened and I didn't have an administrator on site,
Yeah.
I felt like it wasn't safe. But I do know that our principals that have been there, we don't ever move them. A lot of them reach out to move.
Yeah.
And they want to do something different in sometimes a larger school and sometimes in curriculum. So, Mark, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, that's accurate. We can't force, we can't force a person to stay in that role because there's other opportunities. And if there is interest, we will support them in that. We had, in the last 6 years, we had a principal for 3 years. Mrs. Crane was there for 3 years. And then she moved to a larger building. Then we had a principal for 2 years. And then we have Mr. Schoening, who's in his first year there.
And I wouldn't call it an issue. I think if a principal retires, a lot of times what you see is a sort of domino effect of somebody
Yeah,
wants to
exactly.
move into that position, which creates an opening. And, as an employer, we should give principals opportunities to move, and teachers, to the positions and buildings they think they want to be in.
I served as an elementary principal for 12 years in this district and had an opportunity to move up here to work in the teaching and learning department and school leadership, and it was a great opportunity, and I wanted to seek that. And then my role opened up, and then other principals moved in there. So very common.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, my question was kind of worded badly, and that's why I wanted to make sure that that was known, is that when we see comments saying, hey, we need to keep principals at the schools, that's not really something that's up to us. So my apologies on the question.
So I have a question. I wasn't on the board back in 2017, but there were a couple people who spoke from the community that talked about population surveys, and I know in our session we kind of highlighted that there have been trends in the past that have been documented. Can that be shared?
It was, that was done before I arrived. I just was presented with that yesterday, but it did not, it was really looking at what the trends would look like.
It's
Go
a
ahead,
15,
Dave.
well, it's a
Earlier.
15-year-old study, roughly, so it would not be relevant to today's population.
But it's been looked at before, because I know
Right.
there was concerns that it hasn't been.
And honestly, that's what was kind of the driver behind Walnut Grove and I think some of their closures at the time. We're not immune from closures, unlike every district, right?
How many elementaries have we closed here in Council Bluffs in the last 20, 25 years?
Jeez.
Is it 4?
Well, since.
Is it more than that? 6?
Since 11, it's been 4, but prior to that, I believe there would have been about 4 or 5 additional schools.
So just in the last
If we're
10
looking
years.
at 25 to 30 years ago. But other schools would have been built to
Right,
replace. So,
right. But just in the last 10, it's been 4?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well, I think that's, look at, like, we're talking about, Cedar Rapids was talking about closing the school with like 180 kids because it's too small. I mean, this is not just an us discussion, unfortunately.
And I know it's been brought up also as far as efforts to try and get students in other schools to possibly transfer to Crescent. I know we kind of talked a little bit during the working session that after the fire, there was letters that were sent out about that, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was also given to me, I think Ms. Ostrowski found my admin found the letter and shared them. I think it was 2008. Dr. Bruckner made the offer to any parent in our district, elementary parent, that if you would enroll in Crescent, that if you would allow your child to ride their bus to their home school, that we would bus them from that to Crescent Elementary. And that was not successful. But it was an option that Dr. Bruckner pushed out.
Actually got one of those letters. I know Davis also brought up about the fire and this kind of delaying in the reopening of the school, and I don't know if you can talk a little bit about.
I guess I don't
Remember
recall
from
that there was
time?
any purposeful delay in the construction process. I mean, it was an arson fire, and so any of the funding the majority of the funding that we received came through the insurance policies that we had. So there were several things that were related to timeline based on what the insurance company was asking from the district to be able to proceed with the construction, the types of documents that were needed, the architectural and engineering documents. And so I guess I can't remember that we were purposefully delaying the construction. It was a matter of going through the process so that we could get the appropriate funding.
Gotcha.
Because at that time, if we chose not to rebuild the school, we were given a substantially less amount of money should we rebuild the school, which, of course, we know we did.
Right. I think it was 2 years later when the governor cut the budget overall by 10%.
Roughly, yeah.
And that which hurt, probably caused some of our funding issues now still, given the limited numbers we've had over the years, so. I did have one more question on the, this question about we haven't continued to reach out to the Crescent School Community Alliance or Community School Alliance. Maybe we can talk about whatever efforts and then what we have tried to do. I feel like, I mean, we went through a crazy time, I feel like, through pandemic, but I just, maybe anything you can share, or anything you can share.
Talk about the work Mariah did too.
Yeah, Mariah Schroeder was principal there for 2 years, and she did some work with the Alliance into the pandemic. And the community, the meetings didn't continue as much, but they were kind of more apart, and they did cease at one point. I'm not sure if they have met with the new principal this year.
But I thought Mariah was very active in pushing out in the communication.
She was, yes.
And making sure that we kept Crescent in the forefront of everyone.
Yeah, and then continue, even like the big kickoff for the school year. I know Mr. Schoening, the current principal, really did some robust work there. And one thing that he currently does that I didn't mention in the action is he's probably one of our chief tweeters on Twitter. If you follow the school or him on Twitter, you'll see many pictures of students learning in the school. So he's doing a really nice job of promoting that. That's his big strength that he has.
I do know that as a board, a lot of the discussion during the pandemic, as we started opening that virtual academy, was this is a great way to support Crescent. Great way to support kind of the teachers that we put in place and the staffing model we have there, to try to kind of get us back to where enrollment would come back. I mean, that's what the discussion was.
So there was a comment, why don't we show the open enrollment of the other schools in our district when we were comparing to Crescent? When I look at, and I just looked at the numbers, and at 58%, do we have any school other than Crescent that would come close to 58%? Open enrolling either out of the district or to an in-district transfer?
Yeah, not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge.
I don't know. I too take the advantage of open enrolling into a school because I too have a soft spot in my heart for TJ. I haven't gone there, so I do the same thing with my kids. And I get the parents have every right to do that, just like people have every right to enroll. Under the state laws, you can enroll wherever you want right now, and so I think that's something we just have to deal with as a district, wherever that is. But I do know we have parents who enroll into, quite a few enroll into Hoover and other in College View that really are in that Crescent community because they like, I think, some of the other services we can provide there because we have 500 kids in the school or 300 kids in the school, which is tough to do with a school of 70.
Yeah, and Dave, that's a great question, a great wondering there too. We do have students that open and enroll out of our district at all of our schools. The issue is at Crescent, there's such few numbers. Having 9 kids in second grade classroom that's troublesome. All of our other elementary schools have at least 2 sections per grade, and the average is 3 sections per grade. So having a few students open and enroll out does not impact that in a significant way.
No,
You want to keep going?
no, I'm good.
Okay. So I hope everybody knows that the board is very, we're taking this on at a great weight. Myself in particular, I'll speak to myself, sleepless nights, back and forth, don't know what to do, heart versus head. I grew up in the rural community. I grew up on L34, right over the hill from you guys, so I understand, Crescent, and I went to the pancake feed last week. I go several times a year. I get it. As a board member, and this is where my heart and head struggles, as a board member, we need to look at the whole district. And to me, it's hard to see, even on social media, right? Looking through the outpouring of people that are here in this room asking us to keep it open, but at the same point in time, then the other people who live in Crescent saying, that's why I already, I took my kid out. It's a better school over here. It's a better school over there. And the amount of commitment that this board and this community has given into Crescent doesn't seem like it's reciprocated by those that are not attending our school as well. So to have 122 kids in the district and only 51 attend Crescent, that to me is concerning. And with the new subdivision, only 2 children, I believe, are attending Crescent. 5 open enroll completely out of our district, and 1's at St. Albert's. So even with the newer houses being built and those that have kids, we don't have any guarantee that those children are going to still come to Crescent. And the small data that we have would actually lead us to believe that they're not going to attend. And if we look at the number of kids who continue in Constable schools after 5th grade and stay in Constable schools, it's a very small number. I believe it was shared, it was 6 in the last 3 years.
Well, we looked at the numbers in the 2021 school year. There were 8 students that were in 5th grade that ended the year at Crescent. There were 8 students that ended the year in 5th grade, and of that group, there were 3 students that ended the year at 6th grade in our system. So we lost 5 of those 8 students.
Right, and it is a right, Troy, it is a right. But we need to be stewards of the entire district, and we are a K through 12 district. And so it is hard to say we're going to put all these funds and all these resources to then in 6th grade basically be dropped like a hot potato and say, see here, we're going to go now. That's part of the struggles that I have, is that I know that we have a very dedicated group of parents and community members that are here in the room and who've reached out to us, but we have a larger population that's not supportive of Crescent schools and are taking their kids elsewhere. And that's where we come back to the equity conversation that we've had before. And is it equitable to our other schools to divert that funding? And I know nobody likes to talk about funding, but funding is a large part of this equation. If we had the money, if we were fully funded, if we were funded for special education, if we had that funding, it would be a whole different conversation. So that's just kind of where I am right now. I guess one other part that was a comment that was brought up last time, and I reached out to Dr. Murillo about this, was about busing costs, and there was a thought that there would be an increase to busing costs, so we really wouldn't be saving the full $900,000. And Dr. Murillo reached out to me to let me know, there's already routes in place, so there is no additional funding from there. And I attended the legislative coffee on Saturday, and Majority Leader Winchell alluded to the fact that potentially there would be funding coming from Des Moines, and kind of just floated it out there and then had to go to another event. And he reached out this afternoon to me and said, he apologizes for the confusion on the topic. He was just asking for more time to explore different funding options. He did not mean to convey a commitment that there would be any additional funds. And after speaking with Dr. Murillo, he now has a better understanding of the situation and why the discussions are moving forward. He wished that there was more he could do to try and save the school long-term. However, he doesn't have any viable options for funding at this time. This is one of the people in charge of giving us the funding saying he doesn't have it, while Des Moines sits with a surplus. And this is the start of some very hard conversations that are going to be happening all around the state here on out with these budget issues.
I guess just to clear up, the final speaker asked, why can't Crescent join Underwood School District? Well, I guess because Crescent is part of the Council Bluffs Community School District. And they chose to be, back in 1966, when they chose, when they were forced, I should say, they were forced to choose a school district. They could have chosen any school district, I would assume, at that time, but they chose Council Bluffs at the time. So that's.
I just want to say this. I mean, this decision, it's excruciating. This is terrible. None of us really want to come to this decision. I mean, the fact that we have to consider this measure, it's really frustrating. But we have to make a decision, just Jill, exactly as you said, that is most equitable to all of our students' education while also being responsible stewards of our taxpayers' dollars. I mean, it's been presented, we've lost over 400 students in our district since 2020. I mean, that's a number that is very difficult to make up since our general fund is funded by enrollment. And that's before we take, state legislative measures like our school vouchers and open enrollment busing that is still on the floor for a potential vote. I think actually one of the comments that was made today made it especially clear to me about TAG. I myself was a TAG student, and it was a transfer because of it. I was in the Bloomer School District. We moved. Then I was supposed to be in the PUC, or not district, PUC territory, but we did the transfer request to transfer to Bloomer. Right now at Crescent, we can't offer all of those services. We're not being equitable to all of our students in the district right now, and we have to make sure that we can take care of that. And I like to think that we could all vote no and everything could stay the same, and Crescent could still be a fantastic small school in our district. But we have to face the reality that if we did all vote no, that $935,000 in cost savings has to come from somewhere, which means that it's a decreased educational experience across the entire district. TAG services, counseling, academic interventions, any of those other specialized services that come out of the general fund, those reductions have to come from somewhere, and it's a very tough situation. But yeah, that's my bet, I guess.
And Mr. Peters, just to clarify that comment, that question too about TAG, back in 1991, the district had a different model for TAG services. It was called challenge centers, and there were like 4 sites throughout the system that they put resources in and served students. So if students were eligible for that service at Carter Lake, for example, they would go to a different one that was closest, and the district bused that. We changed that model to provide TAG services for all of our buildings, and we currently have that service at Crescent. It's 1 day a week we have a teacher that serves students, just not as much.
Yeah. I was looking at the specialized services that was in our board docs. That's what I was looking at. But yeah, my point still stands that we need to do what's equitable for everyone in the district, not just one school.
Any other questions or comments from board members? I guess I just have one comment. Over the last few weeks, we've received, I guess I've heard and read, comments that insinuate that there's been ill intent or purposeful withholding of information. And I guess that comes with the territory, being in an elected position. I think it's a popular thing to assume that all of us are bad people with bad intentions, but it's not true. It's just not true. Every one of us cares deeply about all of our kids, and I will defend that. I will defend every single person sitting at this table and working in this district for that. They care deeply about all of our kids. Some of the things that have been said are not true, and I don't think it's worth hashing through all of that because, like I said, comes with the territory, but it isn't true. We do care deeply. This is very difficult to do. Nobody wants to do this. And all of us at one point in time behind the scenes have been advocates for Crescent in one way or another. I just wanted to be on record saying that. All of us have good intentions, and this is a decision we don't want to make. And you can shake your head. It's, like I said, it comes with the territory, I understand. But I care deeply about this district and everybody in it, and give of my time away from my family, and do it happily because I feel like I'm making a difference in the community. So I will accept the criticism, but it doesn't make it true.
Well, Chris, for what it's worth, some of the fondest memories as a kid were Crescent Fun Days and the mud drags and things that used to happen. I mean, they probably still happen. I just don't attend that. Had friends lived all over they had the coolest little, in the 1970s, the little split level houses and things out there were way neater than any of the other houses around here. And had friends lived over there, and we were up in Crescent all the time. And probably that led to some of my fighting for Crescent, even 6 years ago, right? It's the memories of then. So I understand it. And I agree with you, Chris. I'm a person who gives hundreds of hours a year to all our students. And it's not what I do for a job, but it's what I do in our nonprofits, what we do on the side. It's what I did earlier today. So, it's kind of constantly fighting for kids. But I do reference what Patrick said and Jill said, I think, about equity kind of for all the kids in the use of our budget, which I think is where that head heart thing is at, like Jill was talking about. So, but I think you're right. So.
Before I close the discussion, I just want to make sure everyone is ready to move forward with the vote, or if you'd like to talk a little bit more, I don't want to rush that. Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes. The resolution passes. This has been extremely difficult for everyone. I recognize that. And our focus will be on assisting students and families in the transition now. I do want to thank and recognize all of the parents of the Crescent community for their respectful and heartfelt comments and dialogue throughout the process.
I agree.
We do have a few more resolutions to go through, so.
I can make a motion on that next one. If you'd like, move to approve the school boundary line changes to be in effect beginning in the 2023-2024 school year for Crescent Elementary, Lewis and Clark Elementary, and College View Elementary schools.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I guess those were shared earlier on in the presentation, what those boundaries were. So probably not much more to say there. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes. Next is approval of a contract with Cox Business for leased lit fiber service to the Scott Data Center.
I can move to approve the contract with Cox Business for lease lit fiber services for the Scott Data Center as presented.
Second. So maybe we talk about the E-rate program here.
Yes,
Yeah, you-
I'll ask Mr. Stiles to join me at the podium to make that, to update you. And John, why don't you talk about all three at one time? Okay?
So E-rate is a program managed by the
Mayor.
federal government.
Talk in the mic more.
E-rate is managed by the federal government and through the USAC program. And what it does for us is it gives schools with poverty a greater percentage to allow us to bring technology, especially data transmission, to our schools. So the first one, the Scott Data Center, that's our backup systems, and that's where we house a lot of our servers. And that's a level 3 data center, and so it's a great protection, and that's how we would connect to them. The second one would be fiber for the Early Learning Center, and that particular one, that's going to allow us to connect the internet / connection into our district for printing and phone access. The rest, the CAT 2 program, that is designed where we get, for our district, it's an 85% discount that allows us to upgrade the technology throughout the district, such as, in this particular case, cabling for our wiring closet, some fiber connections, and then finally we get to upgrade our wireless system that hasn't had an upgrade since 2017.
Any other questions?
I just kind of had a quick question. So the idea with the E-rate, so, because I see the dollar amount, it's 162,000. So the idea is we pay that and then we're reimbursed the additional E-rate? Because at the bottom it said something.
We do not actually pay that. That would be the bear method. We take the other method, which is I believe it's called spin.
Yeah.
And what happens, we either pay the 10% if it's Cat 1, or we pay the 15% if it's Cat 2.
Oh, okay.
And then USAC pays directly to the vendor.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was right.
Yeah, it's a significant savings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saving $2,400 a month, so.
My screen says that we're moving on the resolution for the CAT 2. I believe we still have to approve the contract with Cox.
Why did it say that?
We didn't approve Cox yet. John just spoke to all.
Right.
Oh, I skipped that one. I apologize.
No, that's
I
all right.
went down, can't, close this, I apologize.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're doing a roll call vote on the contract with Cox.
Yes.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Give me a minute here, before I mess this up. Mr. Arthur,
Yes.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes. Next, we have approval of the 2022-23 E-rate Cat 2 bid approval.
Okay.
All right, I'll move that the board approve the bids for Category 2 E-rate eligible Ruckus wireless access points 901-R650-U500 or US 000, I don't know which, 4x4s. Fiber optic cable and fast connectors from Smart Wave Technologies. Be it resolved, the board also approves the bid for Category 2 E-rate eligible Cat 6 white, blue, yellow cable from Computer Cable Connection.
Second.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
So funding from this is from Pebble, right? Yes. For technology? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
It's funny, I was telling somebody how much we're paying for this cabling, and they were like, oh my gosh, how do we get that for our business?
And for schools.
Yeah, significant savings.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur.
Yes.
Mr. Tripp.
Yes.
Mr. Kazire.
Yes.
Ms. Shudek.
Yes.
Ms. Myers.
Yes.
Mr. Peters.
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla.
Yes. And the motion has been approved. Next, we have approval of the contract with Cox Business for fiber service to the Ann E. Nelson Early Learning Center.
I move to approve the contract with Cox Business for dark fiber service for the Ann E. Nelson Early Learning Center, as presented.
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
What's dark fiber?
Not blind.
Good question. I don't know.
Dark fiber.
You've heard of the dark web. Dark fiber.
As opposed to lit fiber, we are responsible to light it. Dark fiber, all it is in this particular case, Cox Communication, they give us the fiber strands between the building. We put we light the fiber up and connect it to our switches.
Got it.
Where if it was lit fiber, they light it up, they monitor it for us.
Thank you.
Nice. That sounds
I know.
darn techie lingo.
Much sense to me.
I tell you, it costs $53 a month. Seems okay.
Seems all right.
Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Ms. Shudek?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes. Finally, we have a second reading of policies. Is there a motion?
I can move to approve the second reading of policies and corresponding administrative regulations as presented. 402, human relations and, it's part of my job
always
for
like
being
to
on
see
the
jumps in on
committee.
these.
402 for human relations and interpersonal responsibilities. 409 for employee participation in political activities. 411 for employee records. 424 for Family and Medical Leave Act. 426 for paraeducators. 516 for exclusion of communicable diseases. 527 for student wellness. 527.1 for nutritional educational promotion. 527.2 for physical education. 527.3 for other school-based activities that promote student wellness. 527.4 for nutritional guidelines and all foods available on campus. 527.5 for nutritional standards of new school meals. 527.6 for fundraising ideas. 611 for student fees. 618 for use of information resources. 618.1 for use of informational resources regulation. 624 for student promotion and retention, 702 for budget considerations by board of directors, 703 for investments, 704 for depository institutions, 706 for payments of claims of goods and services, 708 for insurance management, 709 for internal controls, 711 for funds balance reporting, and 904 for tobacco-free and nicotine-free environment.
Second.
Thanks, Jill.
Nice job,
No
Patrick.
problem.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just want to make a comment. So when I was reading through these policies again, I was always a policy nerd, but I noticed some were approved when I was probably too young to know what they were, but then revised by the time I was in high school. So that kind of tells how young I am. But just kind of going back to what Chris and all of us have talked about earlier is that I was just very impressed by how much we care about our students' wellness and their health and how we want to be, equitable to them. It was great to read about, we don't want physical education to be a punishment. We want it to be a part of a healthy lifestyle, that we don't want people who can't pay for lunch to go back to what I remember back in the days where it was a hamburger bun with a peanut butter sandwich, and that was so embarrassing. But also how we consider our employees a part of this too. And I just wanted to make that public because not everybody goes through the weeds of policies like we do, unless it's really close to their heart and they're messaging us. But that was something I just wanted to share because it just stood out to me the second time going through them.
So I had a question on a couple of these. A lot of the changes were not substantive, just name changes and
Grammatical.
change in the title. But there was one on nutrition education promotion. They crossed out, it says links with community food stamp program and local homeless shelters to provide and share resource programs. And local homeless shelters were crossed out. Is that, why is that? Because I know we have a great, a group here that supports many of our students and families.
Which one is
That is 527.1.
So I sit on the policy review committee, and Diane, jump in where I'm off, right? But a lot of this is based off of code changes when they come to the board. So if there was a change in Iowa code, then we would update it from there. Or if reading through, there's a group of staff, volunteers, community members, things of that nature that sit on the policy. So if there's something from there, but this particular one, I don't remember if it was a code. It had to be code. I don't think we would have.
In 527.1, instead of allows participation, it talks about promoting. So
Yeah.
promote and allow. And then it talks about links with communities, food stamp programs to provide shared resources, and just took out the wording of only with the local homeless shelter.
Because
So
otherwise
it's
you would be
broader.
limited.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we're revising and making it better and changing titles, as you
Okay.
said.
I guess I just want to make sure we're not, I don't know, we have a lot of students who are served through those. I want to make sure they're getting whatever resources we can provide to them for healthy nutrition.
Well, I guess the way I took that is that we weren't, if we just targeted the homeless shelters, that may limit some participation in the program possibly. So I think by taking out and explicitly saying just homeless shelters, it opens up that to a broader, as Dr. Murillo talked about it, it opened up a broader range of those public services that are available that offer the nutrition
Okay.
resources.
Okay. I don't think I had any other questions on this.
Any other comments? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Ms. Hudak?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes. Second reading of policies has been approved. Next, we have our consent agenda, which includes consulting agreements for CTE and TAG, approval of new course offerings for the upcoming high school program of studies that we learned about earlier in our work session, approval of special education contracts with Sioux City Community School District, One Oak School, and Alpha School for students placed outside of our district, personnel action, and claims and accounts. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move approval of the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Mr. Wilson, please call the roll.
Mr. Arthur?
Yes.
Mr. Tripp?
Yes.
Mr. Peters?
Yes.
Ms. Myers?
Yes.
Ms. Hudak?
Yes.
Mr. Kazire?
Yes.
Mr. LaFurla?
Yes. Consent agenda has been approved, and that concludes our business. We are adjourned.